Logos, persuasion through reason and evidence. Aristotle divided the means of persuasion into three categories: ethos, pathos, and logos. Each consists of a number of strategies used by authors to persuade different kinds of audience for a variety of writing situations. This video will focus on the third of the three appeals, logos. To support your arguments, you can select from a spectrum of evidence, such as facts and statistics, surveys and questionnaires, interview data, experimental results, personal experiences, observations, images, videos, and audio, or primary sources from archives like letters from dead presidents, or the sketches of dead and living artists. What counts as valid evidence will be shaped by the genre and the context you're writing in. In other words, a personal essay could include personal experience, but a lab report assigned by a professor may not permit the use of personal experience. What's valid or not valid is also shaped by your discipline and audience. For instance, a scientist will expect to read all experiment results when reading a science article or lab report. However, an author of a book for a mass audience will omit or condense the same experiment results because a mass audience would get bored or lost by all the numbers, concepts, and terms. When creating arguments, there are errors of reason that you need to watch for. These are also referred to as fallacies. The most popular one that you probably hear in the news all the time is called slippery slope. And you've probably heard adults claim that if teenagers learn about condoms, then teenagers will become promiscuous. A slippery slope argument takes one premise, then basically jumps to a conclusion without sufficient proof or evidence. The next popular fallacy is hasty generalization. This is another way to describe stereotyping. For instance, the popular misconception that Asian females are terrible drivers. Stereotypes like this are easy to spot. What you want to avoid in your writing are sentences like this one. According to one study, drinking diet soda causes autism in children. Therefore, children should not drink diet soda. Okay, we have one study making this claim. Do you have any other studies to support your conclusion that children shouldn't drink diet sodas? Just referencing one study to formulate a conclusion is a pretty common mistake in student writing. The next popular fallacy is the either-or argument. Oftentimes, people or problems are described as either one way. For instance, millennials are entitled and lazy, or the polar opposite, millennials are overworked and distracted. These types of arguments make it appear that there are only two options, not 3, 4, or 5, or 100 options. You often hear either-or arguments from parents. You're either going to college or working for your uncle at the shop. The straw man fallacy is commonly used but not widely known. In general, these are arguments that attack another at the extreme where one would be weakest, like the way a straw man is weaker than your everyday man. For instance, students who receive F's in college will end up in prison or homeless one day because they have no goals or aspirations. Now, it's possible that some people who have flunked college classes have gone off to prison. However, the writer presents this extreme situation as a general rule. False analogies are fallacies probably most common used in troubled relationships. When you don't take out the trash, that's like a bird abandoning its nest. Huh? The reasons why a bird abandons a nest has very little to do with why a spouse doesn't take out the trash. But the point is the spouse is being neglectful. We use false analogies all the time to express our emotional feelings. In written arguments, these false analogies can actually weaken your point and purpose. Let's look at this one example from About.com. Students should be allowed to look at their textbooks during examinations. After all, surgeons have x-rays to guide them during an operation. Lawyers have briefs to guide them during a trial. Carpenters have blueprints to guide them when they are building a house. Why then shouldn't students be allowed to look at their textbooks during an examination? There now, she said enthusiastically, is the most Marvy idea I've heard in years. Polly, I said testily, the argument is all wrong. Doctors, lawyers, and carpenters aren't taking a test to see how much they have learned, but students are. The situations are altogether different, and you can't make an analogy between them. When someone spots the lack of similarity and connection between your analogies, then your argument is weakened, as well as your credibility and authority as a writer. This next fallacy is commonly misunderstood. Begging the question has nothing to do with begging nor question. It actually refers to circular reasoning. The conclusion or answer to the premise is stated within the premise itself. For instance, I failed the SATs because I didn't pass it. Failing and not passing are the same thing. You haven't explained why you didn't pass or failed. Here's another one. The Bible is the Word of God because God wrote the Bible. This argument is used all the time by religious zealots. Ad hominem is a pretty easy fallacy to catch. We hear these arguments all the time during election years when candidates attack each other in television ads. Here's one example. Politicians continue to cut funding in education because they are greedy and ignorant. We attack the person's character as a way to achieve superiority. Bandwagon appeals are arguments most used by teenagers and college students. You should take a drink. Everyone else is drinking. The next time someone pressures you, you can tell them they're an idiot for committing one of Aristotle's logical fallacies. They'll definitely make you sound cool. And the final common fallacy, even though there are far more you could research, is faulty causality. It's when we take two events that occurred at the same time or one after the other and claim that one caused the other. For instance, in the last 10 years, teenage obesity rates have risen. In addition, in the last decade, teenagers play video games 13 hours a week on average, time that could be better spent exercising. It is obvious that playing video games causes teenage obesity. The reason why that this is a weak causal relationship is because there are hundreds of other things that have happened in the last 10 years that could have increased teenage obesity rates, like more cars on the road, industrialization of our food sources, soda machines on high school campuses, the outsourcing of cafeteria food, and so on. I see these types of fallacies made on the evening news all the time. Journalists take two events, like video games and school shootings, then make the claim that one causes the other. People assume that if we get rid of video games, then teenage obesity will go away, as well as school shootings. Faulty causality is popular in the media because it sells. It's easy to reduce complex problems into a clean equation like 1 = 2. This type of fallacious thinking impacts policy at the local and global level. This concludes my video on logos, the final video in my 3-part series on Aristotle's ethos, pathos, and logos appeals.